It being 5:31, we have a quorum present. The warrant the agenda is duly posted. I'll call this October 23rd Select Board meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your patience while I was away last time in the hospital. I'm back and heading down the road, hopefully in the right direction this time. It's been a bumpy one, but we're going to get there.
Glad to have you back.
So welcome. So the first order of business is the acceptance of the minutes of October 10th. I looked at them. I was not there. They looked like it was a productive meeting. So is there thoughts and concerns about the minutes?
I reviewed them and I found no errors.
I'm all set, Bob.
Okay.
I
Is
will
there a
move, I will move to accept.
There's been a
Seconded.
motion's been made and accept the minutes of October 10th. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call this matter to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Rick? Andrew?
Aye.
And myself is abstaining. The motion passes. Moving on to liaison reports. Andrew, do you have anything you'd like to report on?
I actually do not have any updates this time around, so I'll pass.
Okay. Rick?
All right. The police is coming up later under old business. I'll let that sit till then. Town Hall, the tax title is coming up under old business, so I'll let that sit. One of the new things that came to my attention this week was that our town seal has an inaccurate date. And I will pursue this and get back to you later, but the nuts and bolts of it are, our town seal shows us incorporated in 1768. And as I understand it, confirmed by the town clerk, that is the year we were chartered, but we were not incorporated until 1775. So we'll have a discussion about that later on, because that's fresh news, and it's just a matter of it would have to go before town meeting, but the seal that we've been using is incorrect. Veteran Services, I did attend the Upper Pioneer Valley Veteran Services District quarterly meeting. It was very interesting, well attended by all the other towns as well. I mentioned at our last meeting that the Veteran Services Officer was hired and that it was Jeffrey Cochran, as was noted in the minutes. I didn't know at the time he's a Shelburne resident, so that's very nice. It looks like there's two components to our budget for them. One is minor at about $4,400. The projected fiscal year is about 5% increase in that category. And the other appears to be, without real numbers yet, about 3% of an increase, also moderate. And they assured me, or us as a group, that they would have those numbers come January, plenty of time for our budgeting process. And that's it.
All right, excellent. Highway department's got a lot of moving pieces going on. The barn has begun construction today. So we're working on so the contractor has arrived and has started marking out and setting holes for the supports for the pole barn. We asked residents and our neighboring, as well as our neighboring friends from Coleraine and Heath and other areas, be patient. Next week we will be closing Brook Road. We have riprap in to repair the washouts from the flooding in July. We have an excavator lined up to come in, and we'll be closing. I think we're just going to be closing the road during day operations, and then have it open during the evening, because that way they won't interfere, traffic won't interfere with the crews as they work around the brook as they stabilize the embankment. As a result of that, Wilson Grays Road is going to get a little extra touching up, because to handle the increased traffic from the Brook Road being closed. our new truck, which has arrived, has been lettered and is working out well so far. They're pleased with it and making some minor adjustments to become the patch truck. You notice are going to be looking at, as well as a few other areas that need hot patch before winter and the asphalt plants close up. So they're going to be got a busy week or two coming up in front of them. We're going to try to get as much done as weather holds out. I have not met with the senior center. There's something going on Thursday, and I'm not sure what. I have to call Julie to find out. But I got to see if I'm mobile and if I have a driver or what's going on. As I've been grounded. My family doesn't think I should be driving at this state. And I'll get back to driving. It's just they think I'm still a little unsteady. But that's neither here nor there. That's all I have. Terry, do you have anything that you'd like to report?
Nothing that won't come up on the agenda. Thank you.
Okay. And our first appointment is at 6, and we have some 20+ minutes, so we can kind of start picking away at our agenda. Going under old business, item A is the streetlight committee discussion, proposed roles. We were asked to think about what we thought the streetlight committee should be involved in and what they should be, thinking about as they move this role forward and get themselves set up. I see that Mr. Walsh is on. Welcome, John. And Tom and Johnson and Kate are also here as well. But I was wondering if Rick and Andrew, have you thought of what you would like to see the streetlight committee be doing and looking at?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Well, I think that the mission is fairly clear, and I think John Walsh and other members of the committee or the Energy Committee may have things to add, but I think overseeing and working with the consultant that we have now contracted with, Real Term Energy Solutions, who will be performing the audit and reviewing their work and asking them questions and developing strategies to present well-informed proposals to town meeting for the best course to proceed in terms of purchasing and installing and managing new LED streetlights is I believe the mission of that committee. That's what I would like to see them accomplish, is to bring forward a proposal that we can put before the voters in a warrant article.
Reasonable and fair, straightforward. I like that. Rick?
I'm on board with what Andrew had to say. I would like to suggest that they also give us regular updates to keep us posted as it proceeds, so that we can stay ahead of the curve and hear what's happening as the process develops. I think I'd flesh out the instructions a little more for what they bring to town meeting. I think that the town has not had a vote on this, and we should be bringing a really coherent side-by-side comparison of purchased and owned and the Eversource, just to give people the background to make an educated decision come May. So I think their charge should be, as Andrew said, collect as much data as possible, put it in a form where the town meeting participants can get a good handle and make a prudent decision.
Yeah. Bob?
Yeah, go right ahead, Andrew.
I would agree with Rick. I think the only distinction I would make there is that whatever gets recommended and onto as a warrant article, be that proposal, and that it be supplemented by handouts that kind of provide the side-by-side comparison and the sort of background information that Rick was talking about, so that we don't have a massive warrant article, but we have a well-informed electorate that can review the material, as we often do with other articles where we have information pieces that sort of provide context for the article.
Has the group had a meeting?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So Jeff Bednar has sent around an email trying to set up a meeting with the representative from Real Term Energy. We have not yet met as a committee in order to choose the roles in that perspective. We will try and set that up in the next couple of weeks to get that going.
Good. Great. That's all I
Yeah,
have.
the only other piece was, I'm not sure Jeff has heard back from anybody on the finance committee as to who's going to be their designee.
Gary,
That would be Todd DeBreel.
It will
Yes.
be Todd. Okay,
Yes.
great.
good. The other thing that all of you guys have got it nailed down, so I don't really have to do much. The only other thing is just to make the Streetlight Committee aware of what Donna had told us about the perhaps the pitfall between executive versus legislative branch functions, just so they're aware.
Could you clarify, Bob? I'm not sure.
Donna had some concern over if you look at the roles of the executive branch, which would be the select board, versus legislative branch would be the constituents as large. Where the executive branch basically takes care of deciding they're the ones that would go out and buy. Well, I'm going to use this. We need a new bucket loader. And it would be the executive branch that would decide whether we want to buy a Volvo, John Deere, or Caterpillar. And does the legislative branch have the ability to override and say, no, we don't want you to buy the Caterpillar. We want you to buy the John Deere. Because she had some concern about those type of streetscape. We're kind of in charge of streetscapes and things of that nature. And legislation isn't necessarily in their, wheelhouse. So they should at least be aware that that's out there as a potential tripping hazard. But otherwise, I think everyone's got the right ideas. Yep.
I mean, one question I would have for Donna about that would be, I would certainly be in agreement with her that if we went out to bid on a streetlight package, once we had clarified what it is we wanted, and we got, 3 or 4 bids back, I would agree that the executive function should apply at that point, and the select board would select what we felt was the best bid for the town. But in terms of how we put together the RFP for going out to bid, that might not be an entirely executive function. And there we have, certainly the work of the committee and potentially the wider input of the community if it came down to that, so I think that's where I would still have questions about that, parsing of the executive and the legislative for Donna. So I'm not 100% convinced there that we have that fully nailed down.
So, which is valid, and that's why I asked that we at least have them aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any else that you can think of, John, with that new information? I mean, it's like I said, it's a 30,000 foot overview.
Sure. And my perspective is that we would be collecting this information and bringing it to you anyways, and having town meetings to discuss what the options are. because ultimately the select board is going to have to approve or disapprove of the recommendation of the streetlight committee. So I don't see that as being an issue. Because there's also the opportunity that if any of the bidders or interested parties are already certified as energy service providers, we may not have to go out to bid. And so in that case, we would definitely need to bring that data that we've collected back to you. So I
Okay.
think to Rick's point, we should be, updating the board at least once a month or every couple of months once we get this process going.
Sounds good.
Bob?
Yes, Andrew.
I mean, the only other reason I raised that question for Donna is that we have, in effect, already been down the road that she may be concerned about in the sense that we had a citizen petition that put a warrant article on a special town meeting warrant. Donna might not consider that to be a legit exercise according to the distinction that you just laid out for us, but that did happen and it could happen again, so I think,
That's
I'm
why I
just,
think we should at least be aware of it.
yeah.
Do I recall correctly that the study that's being done could possibly be completed by December?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, that committee needs to get together and get organized and be ready. I don't know how long it takes them. Maybe they start it the 1st of December and they're done the end of December. I don't know, but it would be a little bit of a longer process than that, and it's well into mid-October already. So just food for thought.
And Jeff has done some contact with the representative from Real Energy, provided them some information, and is just waiting to hear back as to when we can schedule a meeting with her, either Zoom or in person.
Gotcha. Okay, great.
Excellent. Anything else for the streetlight committee?
Nope.
Moving on to West County Senior Service District Board of Managers appointments. We had 2 people put in a letter of interest. I spoke with Julie. Terry has had the opportunity also to speak with Julie, and I'm familiar with one of the candidates relatively well. The other one I'm not as familiar with. We have Sylvia Smith, who's already part of the managers, and it was Terry. Do you want us to be able to give both names, or should we just go with what?
Sure. You can give both names. Both individuals submitted letters of interest. I asked each of you to consider which one you felt would be most beneficial to the board of directors.
Okay. All right. So so Andrew and Rick, have you had the opportunity to look over those 2 applicants?
I have for sure.
Yes.
And
I'm prepared to make a recommendation if you want a motion to start the discussion, or
sure, I'd love to hear that.
I would move that we appoint Christine Baronis to the at-large position on the West County Senior Services District.
I'll second that.
That's who I was going to. Motion's made and second for Christine Baronis for the at-large position for the West County Senior Service District. Julie did seem to think she had a good grasp of what was going on. Terry is familiar with her. I'm as well familiar with her, and I think she would be a good asset.
The background is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Terry, since you have a strong organizational memory, I thought I recollected that Christine has served as a select board member in the past.
That is correct.
Okay.
It's in her application.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's like 90, 98, something like that. Somewhere back then.
Yeah,
So-
I would be happy to support her participation. I think she'd be a great asset to that organization.
Okay, so we have a motion made and seconded for Christine Baronis for the at-large position. Is there further discussion on this? Hearing none, I'll call this matter to the vote. All those in favor of appointing Christine to this position, please signify by saying aye. Andrew,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
myself as I, the motion carries unanimous, and we thank Christine for stepping up and being willing to take part in this.
Back and celebrate. This wasn't just a victory for leftist Sergio Massa.
Oh, we have a victory.
Oh, boy.
So moving on, we have 8 minutes. Town-owned textile property, Brook Road, proposed action.
Yes, again, extensive, new information coming to light almost every week, and given the 38-page pile that we have to plod through tonight, I think this can also continue to wait because there is more information pending. I will point out that we have nailed down that there are 6 town-owned properties. There are 4 more properties that are 4 of those properties rather are ready for auction. The other 2 have that annual last possibility to test, and we gotta wait and let those play out. It's into late summer. Those 2 will be ready by next fall for sure if they're not contested further. And then there's 6 others that are currently in some stage of tax title taking. So I've done a lot of work on it, got a lot of information, and there's no pressing need to pursue it any further this evening. So I'd like to bring that forward at another time.
Okay, Terry, do you want to move that for tabled and?
Sure.
Thank you. So we have a rather in-depth document of the proposed job descriptions for the police department. I have looked through them and found them in reasonable order. And Rick and Andrew?
At our previous meeting, when this was presented with just Andrew and I, while you were out, we did have the chief on board. He did answer our questions. As the liaison to the police department, I had met with him several times for several hours when he presented this to me, and then after I absorbed them and had another follow-up meeting to answer my questions. And I personally have no problem with any of the entire batch that he put together.
I'm prepared to move forward with it, Bob.
I am as well. So would someone like to make a motion?
I would move that we accept the outlines as provided by the chief for the job descriptions and the one new policy.
Traffic control.
Policy number 5.07.
Yep.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to move forward on the proposed job description of the policy presented by Chief Greg Bardwell. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, call this matter to the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Rick,
Aye.
Andrew,
Hi.
myself as I, motion carries unanimously. Got a few more minutes. ARPA funds for a request for Pocket Park. Andrew.
I don't have new updates on the grant funding that I'm hopeful that we still may receive. So I just as soon let that rest until we have new information.
Okay,
Andrew, under correspondence, we did receive a letter for the FY24 Community One Stop for Growth application, and the funding was denied.
Dang. That's a
Sorry.
bummer. Okay, well, we're we're down to a smaller set of funds then, and that ARPA funding will become even more important than in our ability to move forward on the park. But well, I'm disappointed to hear that. I'll have to. Did the letter provide contact information in terms of how we might follow up?
It's in your,
Yes,
it's in your
they,
packet.
Oh,
they
okay.
do invite you to follow up with them to learn more about why the application wasn't funded.
Great. Okay, I will do that.
And let's see if we can get through all business in 3 minutes. The Pocket Park Pavilion project work begins October 23rd, so that should have been today.
Yes, they are on site.
Woo-hoo.
Excellent. The few times I've been through the village over the past month or so, it has been, the benches and tables have been utilized a lot, even though the weather this weekends have not been the best. At least there has been a significant use of the seating and dining area. I would say that brings us close enough to the 6 o'clock Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Plan public listening session. So being 5:57, who's going to take the helms on that?
Hi, I'll be sharing my screen for that presentation.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So welcome. Please introduce yourself and let us begin.
Great. Trisha, do you want to start us off while I pull up my presentation?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this public listening session regarding Shelburne's Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Planning Grant, final part of the process, which is really important that we have lots of community involvement to make sure that everybody's voices are heard, that we can develop the most robust and well thought out resilience plan for the town. The team from Weston and Sampson has been amazing to work with. I've been very privileged to get to know new people in town as well. Other partners that are very interested in making sure that Shelburne will be resilient to whatever the climate might throw at us, which after this summer, I think we all are feeling a little bit of weather whiplash. So I just want to thank them publicly for all the work that they did to help get this planning grant going and moving forward. And also to thank all of the town residents who have taken some time out from their evening to be here and help us hear what you think too, because we had a group of a couple dozen people who came together in September, and that's what you're going to be hearing about this evening is the results of that meeting. And then I'll be posting the results of this also on the new webpage that we have. It's if you go to the town website and go to the Emergency Management Committee page, there's a link over on the right side that says Shelburne MVP Resilience, and you'll find all the documents and information, who's on our core team, etc. So I'll turn it over to the incomparable Doris Jenkins, who's the resiliency engineer with Weston and Sampson, and her counterpart, Joanna Nadow, who's a planner with Weston and Sampson.
Great. Thank you so much, Trisha. I just want to check first. Is everyone able to hear me and see my screen?
Mhm.
Yes. All right, great. So I'm actually going to hand it off to Joanna to start us off. We'll go over who is on the core team, and then we'll do our own introductions as well.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for this virtual listening session on the town's Climate Vulnerability and Resilience Plan. We're going to give you an overview of the progress to date on the town's Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Project and give you a chance to provide some feedback and input so we can make sure it really reflects the whole community. The core team was formed to oversee the process and represents a variety of town and community perspectives. So you've already heard from Tricia. We also had John Taylor, Sylvia Smith, Jackie Goodman, Tom Williams, and Will Flanders. And if y'all are here, you want to wave your hand, that'd be great. So the town contracted with us, Weston and Sampson. We are resiliency engineers and planners, and we have done dozens of MVP plans across the state. So we are there to assist you in identifying climate-related vulnerabilities and assist with creating this resilience plan. Our senior project manager, who's not able to join us tonight, is Indrani Ghosh. I'm Joanna Nadeau. I'm a senior resiliency planner at Weston and Sampson, and Doris Jenkins is the resiliency engineer doing all of the good work to get this all done. While we're presenting the work that's been accomplished so far, we really want to hear your thoughts and questions. So you have a few options. You can add them in the chat as we go. We will have a couple points where you can ask questions. And so at that point, you could raise your hand and we'll call on you to unmute and ask your question. We'll also be using a tool to ask you some questions and get answers throughout the presentation, and that's called Slido. So on Slido, the Slido website, you can join and answer polls as they come up. So right now, I invite you to pull up either on your phone or in a new web browser tab and type in slido.com, SLIDO.com, and you'll be prompted to enter a code, and you'll want to enter Shelburne, just like it says in red on your screen there. And once you've done that, you'll start to see some polls pop up that you can answer. You can put questions in here as well. You can scan with the QR code if that's easier for you. And then I encourage you to just leave it open throughout the presentation. You'll see those opportunities to provide some input. So let's do a test run right now. So we're here today to discuss protecting Shelburne's assets and addressing its vulnerabilities. We want to hear from you. What do you see as Shelburne's greatest strength? So go ahead and type in your answer to the Slido. That's people. That's been our experience so far. Yep, people, human capital, community. And again, if you want to join, you just want to pull up a screen, a web screen, and type in slido.com. Walkability, that's a great one. Location, you're in a unique location. Potential for broad community involvement. These are all really important tools in the community being resilient to climate change and in, being able to meet the challenges that you face. Ooh, cooperation, that's a good one. Nature is one of your greatest strengths, absolutely. Forward thinkers. Yeah, cooperation, listening to each other. These are great. Thanks, everyone. Really helpful. I think this has been our experience as well, is that there's a lot of really strong resources in the form of people and community, arts, nature, your location, the ability to get around in town, all really critical parts of the community. So the purpose of today is for you, the community, to review and give input on the actions that have been set out in the plan to prepare for climate change impacts. So if we go to the next slide, you can see the agenda for our time together. We're going to start with a discussion of climate projections for Massachusetts and for Shelburne more specifically. The project is funded by a state grant, the MVP program, and so I'll explain what that means and give you an overview of that program. And then we're going to talk about the strengths, vulnerabilities, and priority action items that were identified during our community resilience building workshop. And we'll talk about what you think of those, and then explain what's going to happen after this meeting in the process once we've gotten some more feedback on the plan draft. You'll have a chance to share more of your thoughts in the Slido polls, and at the end, we'll have time to take some questions. So just to orient you, we're sort of in the early middle of the project. This project kicked off this past summer. We held the Community Resilience Building Workshop in September. This public listening session is a key part of us understanding from the community what the priorities are. And that will all be turned into a plan that will be drafted in December for the core team to review and published or finalized by, I'd say, March at the very latest. We're actually on good track to be done before then. One of the reasons we want to be done as early as possible in the spring is that there's an opportunity to apply for follow-on funding. Those grant applications from MVP are typically due in May. So we're keeping our eye on that to make sure that you have what you need. You guys will be able to apply for those grants if you're interested. So the MVP program is a program focusing on helping communities adapt to the impacts of climate change. We're already experiencing things like stronger, more frequent storms and periods of drought. So more consecutive dry days and more days with larger than 1 inch storms, which leads to, of course, flooding issues and all the associated drought impacts for water supplies, agriculture, etc. We're looking at more days over 90 degrees and the loss of freezing days. We're looking at bigger, more frequent storms and nor'easters, decrease in annual snowfall, and sea level rise, which is less of a concern here. These trends are expected to worsen in the future. We've already seen, as was mentioned, we're seeing it all the time now, these changes, but we now have projections to understand over the next 50 years how this might continue to become more of an issue. And so the state is supporting towns to plan and prepare for these changes by funding planning like this project at the municipal level. So the MVP is a state program. We use the MVP a lot, but it's the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program that focuses on the impacts of climate change and making sure you're prepared and resilient to those impacts. So using climate change data, technical support, and planning tools, we're working to develop strategies to improve your resilience to those impacts and projections. We like to think of this as the fairy godmother that you can ask for whatever Shelburne needs to prepare for the impacts of flooding, drought, heat, storms, or other climate change impacts. So each year, this is the last year's announcement. Each year, the Lieutenant Governor announces the funding for communities. And if you go to the next slide, Doris, you can see here in pink are all of the communities that have received those action grants. So now you are eligible, as you complete this process, you'll be eligible to apply for action grants to implement the priority actions identified in your plan. So overall, the goals here are to improve your resilience and preparedness, to do that in collaboration with contributions from community members and stakeholders, to do that including not just policies and projects, but to ensure there's education and planning involved, and then ultimately to address the resilience-related actions that are top priority for your community. And you can see Shelburne there in the yellow star. You've just now joined the last kind of cohort of communities finishing up the MVP planning and designation process. So as I just alluded to, so you're currently in the planning grant process, and that is step 1. And we're developing action items with the idea that those can help the town become more resilient. If they're implemented, you can get money for them through the action grant program from MVP. So any of the projects that are in the plan can be applied for to receive an action grant from MVP. Next slide. And just to give you a flavor, MVP action grants fund all kinds of things. So it can be around assessments or planning for more specific issues in the community. It can be around designing and permitting things like flood protection, road redesigns, other nature-based solutions. It can be for constructing and implementing any of those types of infrastructure projects. It can even be for land acquisition or additional outreach and education. It's really just critical that the action grants are addressing climate change projections and impacts, building local resilience, and are benefiting the community in a broad way. The MVP program does encourage regional projects. So if you can think of a project that is something that might be good to do with other neighboring communities, they'll particularly look favorably on that. They don't fund projects that are just maintenance or anything that would be fossil fuels, like distributing diesel generators. And they really favor nature-based over gray infrastructure approaches, though they will fund both depending on what's appropriate. I'll just say one last thing about funding. So MVP is not the only source of funding for this work. You can go to the next slide. Thanks. There are many opportunities for Shelburne to advance the actions, which we're going to get to in a moment, in partnership with a range of state, regional, and federal entities. FEMA money may be available, your Franklin Regional Council of Governments, EPA. There's a lot of ways that the town can move these projects forward. Hopefully some of the projects won't need outside funding, but for the ones that do, there is grant money to cover those. Typically, most grants will cover the majority of project costs and will look to the town to provide either cash match or a combination of in-kind hours, so volunteer hours, can often be used as match. So our understanding from the core team is that Shelburne wants to apply for an action grant this next spring to advance the projects that we're going to start talking about just now. So I'm going to hand it over to Doris to get into the good stuff and give you a chance to tell us what you think.
Great. Thank you, Joanna. And I know we have given you a lot of information and we will take time to pause and ask if anyone has questions. But for now, we're just going to push through a little bit more content. So on September 13th of 2023, we gathered at 9 a.m. at Fellowship Hall, representatives from several town committees, such as the Planning Committee, the Recreation Committee, the Council on Aging Committee, as well as the Town Library, the Shelburne Fire District, the Deerfield River Watershed, the School District, Great River Hydro, Mass Audubon, the Town of Buckland, and many, many more that I don't have time to list. We're all coming together to kick off this really collaborative community process of talking about resiliency in Shelburne. The Community Resilience Building Workshop follows a prescribed method created by the Nature Conservancy and accepted by the Massachusetts Vulnerability Preparedness Program. The focus is identifying critical town assets and features and creating a list of priority action items that will increase climate resiliency, such as adapting and protecting vulnerable assets where possible. So we focused on 4 climate hazards, and we looked at those assets and identifying whether they were vulnerabilities or strengths. And we looked at assets across 3 categories: infrastructure, society, and environmental. So for each of the assets or features that we looked at, we wanted to identify several attributes. The location and the ownership of the features were identified, such as if they were townwide assets, or if it was in a single neighborhood, or if it was one asset in a specific location. Ownership included if it was privately owned, town owned, state owned, or whether there was shared ownership over the asset. And then we looked at whether the asset was a vulnerability or a strength, or both in terms of climate change. Having this information helps to develop the priority actions and potential partners that might be needed to move forward on actions, focusing on any individual asset. So action items are specifically developed by looking at the top climate hazards in Shelburne and understanding how they impact each of the identified features. So we looked at extreme weather and wind events, flooding, extreme temperatures, and drought. These hazards were identified by our core team as the top hazards for Shelburne and were agreed upon by the attendees at the core team meeting. I will talk a little bit more about how we identify those action items, but first we have a few more interactive polls. So the first one is, we're wondering which of the climate hazards most concerns you as a resident of Shelburne? And so again, this is that Slido polling. It might still be up, but you can also scan the QR code again.
Do this.
So it seems like extreme weather and wind events is coming out as a little bit of a majority right now. I know that when we were reviewing your hazard mitigation plan, snow and wind events are definitely a big impact, especially with road closures and power outages, with power lines coming down from trees and things like that. So this feels very reminiscent of what we were talking about at the CRB workshop as well. And we have one more question for you. How prepared do you feel Shelburne is for future climate impacts based on your experiences? I realize there's a spelling error there. Sorry about that. But I think it's great to see that people are feeling like the town is prepared, but as I think preparedness goes, you can always do more, right? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move into the next set of slides. So this part is really about how we identified priority actions. So developing priority action items is the way that the CRB workshop format hones in on adaptation strategies. So when we talk about climate resiliency, there are 4 major adaptation pathways. So I'm going to talk about these through the lens of flooding. So for example, we can protect ourselves from flooding by installing flood barriers or flood-proof doors. We can accommodate flooding by increasing flood storage and acknowledging that land is going to flood, but raising critical infrastructure to ensure that our recovery time will be quicker and that our buildings won't be taken out by the flooding. We can retreat by relocating to a location that is not susceptible to flooding. Oops, sorry. Oh gosh, sorry about that. Or we can look at programmatic approaches, such as placing limitations that might worsen flooding conditions. For example, if there are new developments that are looking to increase the amount of impervious surface or increase the amount of the surface water runoff, you could look at zoning regulations or different programmatic approaches to adapting to future flooding conditions. So this is just one set of examples to help you understand what those 4 kind of pathways are. But what we did is a part of the CRB workshop was run through all of those scenarios for each of the 4 top climate hazards that I identified, and for each of the features that were identified as critical assets, both as infrastructure, environmental, and societal assets. So we had 4 groups of 6 participants, and at the workshop, participants were asked to identify action items within their groups, and each of the groups internally were able to vote on their top 2 items, their top 2 action items within each of the 3 categories. That's the infrastructural, environmental, and societal. And then each of those were brought to the room. So we had the top 2 from each of the 4 groups. So we had 8 total. There were a lot of overlapping ideas and a lot of consensus between the ideas. And so basically the goal of this is to distill down what is a room's worth of ideas into a set of ideas that have consensus from everyone participating. So once this is a slide of the results of our workshop, and this will be shared with you afterwards as well, but this is basically the idea generation matrix that we use as a way to keep track of everybody's very excellent ideas. So at the workshop, we identified 28 priority action items as a group. And we're going to go over what were voted as the top 5. And just a note that all of the action items, even the ones that weren't voted to be the highest, will be included in the report. So the number 1 voted top action item was to improve community connections and emergency communications within vulnerable populations. So this would involve improving the list of isolated and vulnerable populations and creating a system of emergency communications through the community through increased partnerships around town, such as neighbor wellness check-ins and school-based intergenerational gatherings. It also would include promoting the reverse 911 system and expanding awareness about shelter locations. The second action item was to create a resilient drainage plan. This would involve completing a hydrologic and hydraulic modeling to identify areas of concern and locations for upsizing or upgrading pipes and culverts. It would leverage the FERCog inventory of high priority culverts and use the Resilient Massachusetts Design Standards tool to understand future climate projections and to prioritize and quantify upgrades. And it would leverage funding such as the Mass DEP Culvert Upgrade Funding, which is a grant funding program that helps with cost sharing on these upgrades and planning efforts with towns. Our third action item was to create a resilient roadway improvement plan. This would involve coordinating with Mass DOT, the Department of Transportation, to identify and assess priority roads, bottlenecks and choke points, and protect evacuation routes. And it would identify engineering solutions for paved and unpaved or gravel roads to address increased runoff and freeze thaw cycles that can make maintenance more taxing for the town. Our fourth item is a resilient land use plan. This would involve a plan that would aim to protect the forest and natural land while also maintaining land for affordable housing. It would identify priority actions such as the formation of a community land trust, resilient forest climate planning, and or establishing dynamic forest restoration blocks. And this is something that our representative from Mass Audubon had quite a bit of experience in. And the last item was to improve emergency communication infrastructure town-wide, such as identifying coverage dead spots for cell phones, as well as areas where landlines had poor connection, and expanding cell tower access and developing different communication channels, such as a radio or fire whistle system to reach areas where cell service is poor during emergencies. So at this time, we want to pause and ask if anybody has questions about any of the 5 priority action items that we've laid out, or questions about the CRB workshop as a whole. So feel free to raise your hand or unmute or type anything into the chat.
Not getting anything on the Slido side in terms of questions, Doris, just so you know.
Okay. If no one has any questions, we can move forward. Joanna, can you reset this one?
Oh, these are real time. This just.
Oh, these
opened.
are real time. Okay. So now we're asking you to rank the 5 action items that we identified in order from most to least urgent in your opinion. So disregarding the order that we put them in, based on the information that we shared, which do you think is the most important for Shelburne to address sooner rather than later? And for this one, I believe you should be able to drag and drop in the Slido box so that you can set the order of them. So you can drag whichever one you think is the most to the top and so on. And we'll give you all a minute to do this one since it's a little bit more involved than some of the other multiple choice questions. But we appreciate if you're able to provide input. This is a great way to add consensus since these projects are what we'll be looking at for applying for future rounds of grant funding with the town. And so having consensus on which ones you all think are most important, this is a great way to get your voice heard. That being said, if you're unable to access the Slido polls at this time, we will have a slide at the end where you can get our email and share yours as well so that you can share additional input. This is not your only opportunity to share input. John?
Yeah, thank you. I'm John Harrington, Bartles Ferry Road. I did have a question. I wasn't at this event you're discussing, but it sounds to me like most of what you're talking about is the kind of stuff you would expect the police department and the road department to be making plans for anyway. And you're trying to tie it into the idea that we can expect substantial climate change in the future that will result in more extreme weather events, but that may or may not be true. I mean, climate is always changing, but there's a huge amount of uncertainty about whether how climate is going to change or whether it's going to change significantly. So I'm not sure why this isn't a waste of time and money, why we shouldn't just allow our existing town operations to town departments to make plans for weather events the same way they've presumably always done. And then one other thing I would just mention is I'm always a little skeptical about the idea that doing such and such is not going to cost the town any money because we can get grants or the state will pay for it. That may be beneficial to the town from a very narrow point of view, but on the other hand, that's a way to let the state manipulate people into taking their money, and gives them an excuse to raise taxes and expand the kinds of local government that they can interfere with. So can you sort of, I know that's 2 or 3 different questions, but I'm just not sure, given all those considerations, why this is a useful project.
Sure. So I can take a first stab at answering some parts of those questions. So I think, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Shelburne's departments or staff, but I think one thing that we are seeing consistently in towns across Massachusetts and across New England, both small towns and big cities, is that these weather events that are happening more frequently, such as the flooding event that we experienced in July and August, and the changes in the way we're experiencing snow and runoff throughout the year, the towns are struggling to keep up with maintenance. For example, the flooding is leading to increased maintenance needs for the town. If there's a lot of washout on gravel roads, or if there's culverts that are backing up because they're undersized, because they were designed for the storms that we had 60 or 70 years ago when they are installed, but now the storms are coming much larger, the drainage watersheds are changing as we change land use. And so it's not only that the storms are changing, but it's the land is changing as well. And so in trying to just react to these changes, and for example, if there's a storm that causes a lot of damage, you're reacting to those changes in real time. So the goal of these projects is to identify how we can be proactive instead of reactive to these events, because they are happening and maintenance crews are always struggling to keep up. DPW is always struggling to keep up with maintenance of roadways and pipes, and it's a lot to ask of communities that do have limited funding most of the time. And so I think the goal of using grant funding to address these issues and to prepare for future and existing climate scenarios is so that you can feel like you're ahead of the game rather than always just reacting to the things that are happening. And I would love to let Joanna have an opportunity to answer that question as well.
I think you said it well, Doris. I mean, what we're seeing across the state, really across the region, is that the challenges around emergency communications, checking in on people during storms, as well as roadways and drainage, these are things that are starting to become more than the town can manage on its own, because the frequency and severity of storms and weather events is getting worse and worse. And so the opportunity that Shelburne has is that there is state funding available to kind of tackle some of these projects in a proactive way, as Doris said. So that's really, I think, the offering here. It's up to you all to decide whether that's something you want to take on, but we see it as a great opportunity to be able to be proactive and to get some of these challenges addressed with outside support. So understand the concern, but that's sort of the trade-off that we're seeing.
I have a question. My name is Pat Stevenson. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I do a lot of walking around here, and on occasion I do some driving out on a lot of the dirt roads. And I have seen many of these dirt roads where people are living, culverts are washed out, and the road is narrowing because of that. So if you're on a dirt road that has narrowed because of the culverts washing out on both sides of the road, two cars will meet each other and there's no place to turn around.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. That's definitely one of the challenges of being in a town that have gravel roads. They are so important to the community and important to the town culture, but unfortunately, they are also really hard to maintain and can narrow. And that's why the roadway improvement plan and the drainage plan were both brought up as primary concerns by folks who attended the CRB workshop, because that is right at the intersection of what you were talking about. Trisha, yes?
Hi, I just wanted to answer the question that came up in the Slido. Someone had asked how many hours and how much money. So right now, the town has not spent a penny on this. It has received almost 140 volunteer hours from members of the community to get this project going. We received $36,000 to do this planning grant. And I think, so that should answer your question about how much money and how much time.
Thank you. And we have more time for questions after, but I do want to get one more Slido poll in, which is asking who within the community should be involved as we move forward with these projects. So that could be different committees, that could be state agencies, that could be specific people or anything like that. But we would just love to hear from you who needs to be involved as we move through both the grant applications, but also the projects themselves.
While folks are answering that, there was another question in the chat asking about some of the items that could be in the resilient drainage plan, asking whether these items would be included. So specifically preventing inflow and infiltration to the sewer system during heavy rain and flooding events, and solidifying communication with Deerfield River dam operators around potential advanced water releases to reduce catastrophic flooding risks during extended rain events in the watershed. And we didn't get into that level of detail during the workshop process, but those are typically some of the challenges and solutions that would be identified in a resiliency assessment of drainage.
I love all of the answers that I'm seeing, especially the ones that are focusing on anyone and everyone. I think that is so evident of Shelburne's community spirit, and is a huge reason of why this project has been able to be such a success. And I think seeing that all of the answers that you all are putting in and how they are matching up with exactly what we saw at the CRB workshop is a testament to just everyone being so collaborative, and a testament to pulling together a great group of people to participate in that CRB workshop as well. All right, so we have about 7 or 8 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we have time to address any additional questions. But first, we want to tell you what is next on the docket. So as I mentioned, 28 priority action items in total were generated through the CRB workshop. This will all be summarized, as well as the entire project and the results of this listening session will be summarized into a summary of findings report that will be released in November for public comment. So we will all be sharing that with you on the website, as Trisha mentioned, but we also will have a Slido poll in just a moment that you could enter your email into, and it won't be displayed on the screen. It will just go to us in an Excel sheet, and that way we could directly email you a copy if you would like that. The final summary of findings report, as Joanna mentioned, will be released at the very latest in March of 2024. And upcoming will be the MVP action grant cycle with the expression of interest due in December and the final applications due in April.
And a question from Andrew in the chat: is the public comment period an opportunity to add findings and/or action items?
Yeah, I think the public comment period is for whatever you all want it to be. It's important to make sure that everyone's voices are heard. So we'll be looking for you to see the action items that we've identified. If there are any that are missing, or any that you think could have something added to it that would make it a stronger action item, we will be interested in hearing all of your comments. And we'll be putting together like a questionnaire form so that all of your comments can be kind of put together in a format that will be shared with us, and then we'll sift through everything.
Another comment from Whit and Tom Miner. Are Buckland and Shelburne, it's hard to say, are Buckland and Shelburne working on a plan together to have a regional plan, especially for the village, also as our various departments that work together or have merged? Trisha, do you want to speak to that one?
Sure. So we would love to do a joint project with Buckland or any of the other neighboring towns. With the MVP program, however, you have to be designated an MVP community before you can engage in an MVP regional project. That's anything that goes with your town and another town. So this step that we're doing tonight is moving us toward becoming an MVP designated community within the Commonwealth. Once we complete this whole project, then we'll definitely be able to engage in regional projects with Buckland or any of the other area hill towns, because they are all MVP designated communities. That's a great question. And if you have ideas, earlier in the chat, if you look at that, I put the link to the resilience page, the MVP page on the town website, and down at the bottom, there's a link to the email where all questions can come also there. And I'm in constant contact, maybe too much, with the folks at Weston and Sampson. So I forward anything to them that I can't answer myself.
And we actually had at least one representative from Buckland that was at the Community Resilience Building Workshop. We typically try to get neighboring towns that might have things in common. And I know some examples were shared from the work they've been doing, and they, were there to hear all the ideas that were discussed. So I think we planted some seeds at that as well.
And the fire chief from both towns, and I think Herb is here, the Shelburne Falls Fire Chief is here too this evening. Both were present at the Community Resilience Building Workshop, at least most of the time. And then we had a lot of community organizations present, as well as the school superintendent. So we definitely have our feelers out to go engage in a regional project.
And I just want to note that actually the regional coordinator for your region for MVP, Andrew Smith, is here. Andrew, I didn't see you at the beginning, but would love for you to just briefly introduce yourself.
Hello, folks. Andrew Smith, he, him pronouns, the Greater Connecticut River Valley Regional Coordinator for the MVP program. Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to reviewing your plan. So yeah, just keep up the good work. And so for regional projects, it doesn't hurt for both communities to be certified. But yeah, we like to see regional strategies that benefit all the towns in the region. So let's keep that broad thinking going. So especially with a town like Shelburne, with such a close relationship with Buckland. So it would be great to see some regional projects between the two.
Great, we've got 2 minutes left. So if anyone has any last questions, we're happy to take those. But again, Joanna or Tricia, would you mind putting in the Shelburne MVP email address into the chat so that if anybody has any questions, they can send them to there. And we want to thank everyone so much for coming out tonight and participating in this listening session. This is a huge first step for Shelburne in becoming more resilient and becoming an MVP community. And we really appreciate everyone, and thank you so much.
We have one more question or comment, really, from Garth on the chat. 2 of Shelburne's largest landowners are currently or will likely soon be undergoing changes from their previous mandates. Can looking into the town's future involvement be part of this planning process? Does anyone else want to speak to that knows a little bit more of the context there?
Can you
I would
repeat
look at
that?
Andrew.
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. 2 of Shelburne's largest landowners are currently or will likely soon be undergoing changes from their previous mandates. Can looking into the town's future involvement be part of this planning process?
I don't know how to answer that because I don't know which landowners they're referring to.
Garth, are you able to unmute and say a little bit more?
I personally think that's more of a side conversation
Okay.
I would say
at this point.
they're on the Sarah Fisk Road. Both people live on the Sarah Fisk Road.
Again, I don't want to speculate and go into
I see.
people's personal property and
I see.
issues at
This
this
is the
point.
public land we're speaking about. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that sounds like a good, actually probably part of the resilient land use plan is looking at kind of a town-wide opportunities and changes. So I think that's probably where that fits in. And then we have one more question from Joe P. How do you plan on educating workers to become equipment operators and ways to replenish our emergency volunteer participants? Which I don't remember if we had an action kind of towards that end in the workshop, but I think that there's some really important actions needed there to make sure you have an emergency response workforce. I think that's what you're getting at, Joe. So thank you for that. We'll take that sort of as a comment, I think, on an action opportunity area.
Just as an FYI, we are currently lacking a chief operator for our sewer district because we haven't been able to attract anybody with the class 4 license that is needed to serve in that position. And many other towns are facing that same problem.
I know.
So thank you. We're going to wrap this up. We do have a public hearing coming up at 6:45. So we need to move on. We thank you very much for your input. That was a very interesting presentation. There will be no more, and I am closing this. There is no more discussion on this topic because we do have a 6:45 public dog hearing. So thank you for everyone for attendance. So it being 6:45, Kyle, are you here? Kyle, there you are. Welcome. So Kyle is here in regards to a violation of hearing order against a resident on Zerfisk Road. This is the second hearing we've had within 2 months, Kyle? Was it 2 months?
Hmm.
Your sound is not working, Kyle.
Now?
Yes.
There you go.
Awesome. All right. Love it when my microphones get swapped around. So yeah, the last hearing was on September 11th.
So would you like to bring us up to date on this? And is the Nolan's here with us tonight?
Not sure if the Nolans are with us or not. I was flipping through the participants really quickly. I didn't see them offhand. Anyways, on the 12th, I was contacted by a complainant, Mr. Coleman, from Wilson Graves Road. He advised me that the previous evening he'd been riding his bicycle along Zerfisk Road when two of the Burmese mountain dogs came out into the roadway. Very similar instance to what had happened during the prior hearings, what we heard testimony to. Mr. Coleman was anticipating being on this hearing tonight to speak directly to his incident with the dogs. I'm not sure if he's here or not. Anyways, apparently Miss Nolan was outside at the time, stated the kids had let the dogs out of the house, and that's why the dogs were out in the road. So this is a hearing to discuss the violation of the orders put forth on September 11th.
Go ahead. Yes.
So Kyle, just to clarify, what you just said is described is an incident that took place after we met the last time, or is this a recap of previous incidents?
Nope, this incident occurred on the evening of October 11th.
October 11th.
Brand new incident.
Okay,
Brand new.
thank you.
And it's the only incident that's been reported to us since the hearing.
That said, was there any response from our letter that we sent from September 11th?
To my knowledge, Terry received a certified return receipt of the letter, indicating that it had been received by the Nolans. I did, let me bring up my report real quick just to make sure I had the correct date. The other week, I did go out and speak with the Nolan. Let me see, Nolan. Yeah, on the 17th, I went out there. I was able to speak with Kelly Nolan at the residence. She showed me some of the stuff that had been put in place. One of the restrictions that had been ordered was a kennel facility or a kennel outside that was secure for the dogs. There is no such kennel. She does have dog runs and tie-outs erected. At this time, both those were in compliance with MGL for tethering, not so much in compliance with the orders put forth by this board.
Were you satisfied at least with the attempts that they were making at that time?
To the fact that both the dogs were restrained upon my unannounced arrival, yes. As I mentioned, as in regards to the orders that the board put forth, on the 11th, that she's not in compliance.
Anecdotal speaking, I can say I haven't seen them out as much as in the past. And I do travel that section of the road a lot. Not bicycle by no stretch of the imagination, but I do travel the section of road and I have not seen them as much. I wasn't sure if they had begun any process. Is there an escalating fine structure, or what is the next steps in regards to
So
this?
for violation of the orders, there is a $500 fine that has been issued along with a second offense failure to restrain citation. Now where we get into kind of questionable area, and I was hoping that Mr. Coleman was going to be here to testify on his behalf to his instance, so you guys could hear it firsthand instead of what he wrote in the statement, which you should have been supplied. The
Mr.
way
Coleman
that-
apparently is here.
available.
Oh, you are here. Perfect.
Yes, I am.
Why don't we hear from Mr. Coleman, then we can recap back.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
Yes. Hello. Thank you for hearing what I have to say. So on the September or October 11th, traveling what direction? Heading north or east on the road. There was a dog that was restrained outside the building that was barking. I saw that first, and then as soon as I got in front of the house, the two other dogs came out onto the roadway and came from the same direction, but one came from behind me and one went in front of me. I got off of my bicycle and put the bicycle between myself and one of the dogs, the one who was in front of me. The one who was on my left side came at me and did not bite me, but made motions that he might bite me. And so I put my bike in between myself and that dog. And then the owner came out and called the dogs. And at that point, they both returned to the home. The homeowner apologized and said that the door had been left open by children who were in the house, and the dogs got into the roadway in that manner. I said that I knew that there had been complaints about the dogs recently, and I said it's a serious hazard for cyclists and anyone who's traveling on the road, a pedestrian of any sort, and that they really need to control the dogs. And I did not say that I was going to make a complaint, but I knew at that point that I would. So that summarizes what happened.
And so I know, Tammy, you were bit and there was no medical care attention needed, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Kyle,
Yes.
it seems pretty consistent with ones that we have previously heard.
Agreed.
So have you issued the second rounds of fines?
Yes, I have. They've been issued to them. Now is for next steps, because it is a violation of a hearing authority's findings, which were uncontested. The select board could order the dogs removed. That would again probably be contested. Not sure if it'd be upheld or not, but you could order all the dogs removed from the property, and they would, by law, have to relinquish ownership of the dogs. I'm not sure if that's where the select board wants to go with that, or if they want to issue a notice of correction with the understanding that if there's another issue, the dogs will be removed.
At
Again,
this point, I'd like to hear from Rick and Andrew
right.
as to their thoughts.
Bob?
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Well, just a couple of questions for you, Kyle. You mentioned that the dogs had been tethered, but not had not had these sort of kennel structures built to accommodate them outside in the way that we had, laid out in the previous order. I'm just curious whether you feel like the tethering is an adequate solution, or do you feel like they should go further and implement the more structural recommendations that we laid out?
Based off of what I saw for accommodations they have currently, if used appropriately, there should be no issue why their current setup should not be capable of containing those dogs.
No, I'm just curious why we ordered them to do the more extensive kind of
I
structural
believe
approach.
that was that's one of the options that's laid out in the MGL for a dangerous dog, and I believe that was just adopted straight from the Massachusetts general laws
Okay.
for the
No,
secure kennel with the roof and embedded walls or solid floor. That's
Right.
that's spelled out in the law, and I think it was just adopted straight from there during the last hearing.
And in terms of your recommendations for how we might proceed, I mean, it sounds like we could certainly give them in essence, a warning that if there's another incident, we would order the dogs to be removed. But in terms of these other measures, what do you recommend? And we should also enforce the kind of kennel structure approach?
We could absolutely enforce the kennel structure approach. As I mentioned, the tie outs, they're sufficient to keep the dogs restrained as long as they're used. But it comes down to actually putting the dogs on the tie out. And then they have to make sure that with that they, especially in the colder months, that they have to make sure they're providing the proper accommodations to the dogs so they don't find themselves in violation of the tethering law.
Right. So you can't tether them when it's freezing and stuff.
Right. Or weather advisories or such. So, and as I mentioned already once, this is the only incident that's been reported to us since we had that hearing.
Rick?
Well, if the tethering isn't a solution for the winter months, and we're fast approaching that, I don't see why we should change our original directive. So I think we should leave that in play, but I would hope that I don't put anyone in jeopardy of being bitten by these dogs that are obviously a problem, that I would support a 3 strikes rule and give them a notice that on top of the fine and that you've already placed for the second, that a third reported incident would result in the removal, confiscation of the dogs.
Kyle, is that generally what you would recommend, or how you see the escalation process going in terms of your experience with other similar situations?
So in several towns, yes, this is how it's worked out. Buckland had a similar case. They did is to coin Rick's phrase, the 3 strikes. And then we ended up taking those dogs because they didn't follow through on the conditions. But I don't have any solid documented injuries from these dogs. So it's not like they're biting the bikers when they're going by. They're definitely causing a traffic hazard. They're definitely causing stress to the bikers. And that in itself is concerning because people should be able to bike along the beautiful road to Shelburne Falls. So if the board wanted to go that route, what I can say is that if there was another incident, it would involve another hearing, at which point the board would have to make a final determination as to what was going to happen with these dogs.
I'm in general agreement with what Rick laid out with the 3 strikes and complying with the directives.
Yeah, I'm there as well.
Am I
Now,
allowed to make a comment?
one moment, please. And you are?
Ann McBride?
One moment, please. Yes, there will be a public comment period. So, Kyle, when the fine is issued, does it go to, back to the sheriff's office, or does it come to the town? How do we know if the fine has been paid?
Depends how she decides to pay it. So it all eventually ends up in Joe Judd's office. And so if she send it back by mail, it comes to me, I deliver it to Joe. Or if she decides to drop it off.
But it
then it'll
comes
go
back to the town coffers.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, is there anyone who'd like to make a comment? You, Ms. McBride?
Yes, I would. I would.
Go ahead.
Yes, I drive the local school bus and I pick up their oldest son, Jack. I have become very
Just
acquainted
please-
with Callie and
Just hold on
What's
one
that?
second. When you're
Yep.
using children's names, please try to keep names of children anonymous.
okay. But
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have become acquainted with Daisy and Callie, the two dogs that are being complained about.
Okay, so I mean,
They
as long
have
as
come
you,
on. They have
Yeah.
come on to the school bus before to see all the children with absolutely no problems at all. If they were vicious, they would not be coming on my school bus. I know that the Nolans have 3 young kids, and I really don't think they would have a vicious dog in their household. These dogs are extremely sweet and very, very gentle. And granted that man riding by on his bike, I can see why they would be barking. They bark at cars when we drive by, but I don't think those dogs have a mean bone in their body. Enough
thank you
said.
thank you for your input.
Sure.
You are,
Patricia Stevenson.
yes.
I did speak up to this the last time that we discussed this at one of your meetings. I do a lot of walking in that area and I have been surrounded by all 3 of those dogs. Now, I have not been bitten by them, but I did have one jump up on me one time who was quite large and it is intimidating. So I really think that we have to find some way to work with this family to restrain these animals because it is frightening. And if you're on a bicycle riding, and those dogs come charging out and there's a car coming, somebody could potentially be killed. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that'd like to make a comment at this point? Kyle, is there any way that we can require, lack of better, good citizenship training or things of that nature for part of this, or is it similar to, or are we pretty much boxed where we're at?
Do you mean like canine good citizen, like one
Yeah,
of those
canine
type
good,
deals?
yeah, where, they're,
You could, that could be a requirement the board puts in place.
Say more about what that is, Bob. I'm not familiar with that.
basically it takes dogs and teaches them how to socialize, how to interact, how to respond with, and Kyle, I'm sure you're better up first on this, where our dogs went through good citizenship, where they, learn, obedience, for lack of better words. Yeah.
Yeah, I would get into like an obedience training. Each it's a couple of different varieties out there. Each company kind of does their own thing with it, but it basically to give the dog a certification of being a good citizen. So like they're supposed to be good in public. They're supposed to have done like some field trials, things like that. It's something the board could require, but that would be at the discretion of the board. And I'm not sure, then they would have to find someone who was holding the classes and all that stuff to
Yeah.
go along with it.
And also it's, if they're not willing to attend a hearing, what would they take their dogs? Is the other question. But just, and looking at this in the broader scopes. All right.
Bob?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I don't know if we can require obedience training, we can certainly recommend it. And in the same vein, I would say we can't require people to speak with us or to attend our meetings, but I would certainly recommend to them that they, work with us and come forward, and that we may be able to help them, develop a better solution. I mean, I don't feel like people. I mean, I feel like people have a right to have dogs if they license them, and they can even have protective dogs who are barky and protect their property. But as soon as the dog leaves the property, that's where their rights end, as far as I'm concerned. And
Yep.
they're not controlling their dogs in public ways or on other people's property.
are
And
correct.
I feel like that's where we need to draw the line.
I agree with you, Andrew. So, gentlemen, how do we want to proceed with this?
Well, I thought Rick laid it out pretty clearly. That
Okay.
I don't know. Is that where you're at, Rick?
We need that in a form of a motion?
Yes, we do.
Okay, then I would move that we leave I'm sorry, Kyle?
I would, just before you make your motion, I would include a time period that they have to abide by this in your motion. Like, it has to be like, if you're making a motion that you're gonna keep the other old orders in effect, and that this is their last chance, then I would write right in that motion that they have until X date to comply with those orders, or they'll be deemed non-compliant.
The original didn't have a date?
It was effective immediately, but just because you're doing this, I would put a hard date in and we'll do an inspection. And if it's not in compliance, then we'll come back to you guys and say they're not in compliance, and you guys can go from there.
What's a reasonable time frame? Andrew, what do you think?
Well, I don't know. What does it take to build a kennel and that sort of thing?
Given the menace that has been recited to us this evening, seemed like a much more mild case than the ones we heard in our previous hearing. I'm sure something needs to go in the ground, and that's about to freeze in a few months. So maybe we ought to be looking at a 2-month timeline, something mid-December.
You could go that far historically. Again, I would have to check I forget whether you guys classified them dangerous or as a nuisance last hearing. Historically, with the dangerous classification anyways, it's been usually 2-3 weeks max for the kennel.
Well,
I'm kind of with Rick, and I would give them 2 months to build the kennel. That's when the ground's going to freeze, and I think that we're kind of coming to the end of bicycling season. So hopefully this will, be a diminishing problem. It'll probably be an increasing problem next spring when people get out on the roads again, but hopefully by then we will have, or the Nolans will have the situation under control.
I'm comfortable with that. I'm going to move that we notify them that we are continuing the previous notice with a new deadline by December 15th to have the kennel to properly restrain them. And what else were we supposed to add to that?
I think the three strikes, yeah.
To be notified that another incident would result in another hearing, at which time they could lose their dogs.
motion's made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded for the Nolans to have a kennel in place by December 15th with the 3 strikes premise in place that if another complaint is brought forth regarding their dogs, they'd be subject to removal from the town. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call this matter to a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Andrew?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Myself as aye. Motion carries unanimous. And I would encourage the Nolans on the letter to come in and speak with us so we can work with them. All right, thank you very much. That concludes the appointments and public hearings for this evening. Moving on to new business.
Hello.
Yes,
Hi, this is Kelly Nolan. I've been trying to get my phone to let me speak, and I was having issues that it was not cooperating.
okay. Thank you for attending, Kelly.
Yeah, no, I've been here the whole time, I swear. I'm willing to do the obedience training. We've been trying very, very hard to get the dogs and the kids on this new routine of being tied up all the time. And it's really hard for the kids to get in and out without one or two of the dogs sneaking out with them, because the dogs just want to be out with the kids. They're out with the kids to protect the kids. And they don't like being tied up because they can't always see the kids, so they don't know they're safe. They're family dogs. They're just trying to protect their kids. They mean no harm to anybody.
So,
They just loud.
so.
And I get it,
where-
intimidated.
Yeah. So when they're playing, are they playing in the front of the house or the back of the house, ma'am?
They move all over the place. Sometimes they're out front, sometimes they're out back, sometimes they're on the side.
Given the proximity of the closeness of the road, I mean, it would seem prudent that there'd be more play structures and playing in the back of the house where there's less chance for being.
Mostly they do outside, but sometimes they grab their trucks from the front yard and they drive them around to the back. We've got play structures out. They do most of their playing out back.
Okay. Gentlemen, we have a new development with this.
We've been doing our best to retrain the kids and the dogs.
Okay. Do you feel the 2 months that we have allotted is appropriate at this point to be able to see if we can get a bit of safety plan in place for your children and the dogs?
We're going to try our best. We're going to do what we can to comply by keeping the dogs confined or on their tethers, and I'm going to work with the kids to have help from me or their dad to get in and out of the house, so that way the dogs aren't taking off and causing problems.
All right. One of the things of being a select board member is that there's very few things that bring more emotion and more input and residents' feedback than dog hearings. They're one of the hardest ones that we have to deal with as select board members, and there's always multiple sides of the story. We were saddened that you weren't able to make the first one. We're glad that you're able to finally, chime in. I had a very similar case in Masonic Avenue a year or so ago, where we ordered that the dog be in the fenced-in area. And we understand you're doing your best. And we have heard now from multiple folks that we feel that the 2-month time period will give you certainly ample time to get that. We ask that you be in contact with Kyle, the animal control officer, and to keep us posted as updates, because we're concerned not only for your children's safety, but for the safety of the public as well. And it's one of the hardest jobs we have to face as a select board member. You kind of know the sentiment of the board as well as, part of the community here. And we certainly do appreciate you chiming in. I'm sorry that you were unable to get in earlier. Technology sometimes works in favor and against us. So at this point, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No.
All right. Gentlemen, are you satisfied?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for your attendance, and we'll be keeping close tabs on this. Is there any further? All right. Moving on, we'll move on to new business. We have the Shelburne Falls Fire District request for staging area for the Bridge of Flowers construction or renovation. Gentlemen, you should have received in your packet a map outlining where the contractors would like to put stuff when they begin to do the renovations for the bridge, and are asking the town's permission for utilization of that area.
Yeah, I saw that. Can you just clarify that those are sites on Water Street, right, Bob?
They're looking at the parking lot behind the art bank, Terry. And were they also looking at the cross street parking lot as well?
That's correct.
And this is for equipment storage, like the Bridge Street construction project?
Yes, it's considered staging. It could be anything from materials to equipment. I would prefer that Cross Street not be in the mix because we're just refurbishing it after Bridge Street Phase 2. Greg Bardwell suggested possibly the lower lot on Deerfield Ave or the Salmon Falls rail yard, just because parking is so difficult as it is.
Yeah. I agree with certainly the cross street parking lot.
Yeah, I would think that the rail yard might offer some other storage potential for materials as well, since the Buckland Highway Department uses it for that purpose, that there might be some spots to pile stuff up if that's what they need.
Every contractor likes the convenience of having their materials close at hand so that there's not a lot of running back and forth. But the downside is that parking lot is fully utilized. And I did ask for a time frame of the construction period, but until it goes out to bid, they couldn't give me that information.
Maybe we could hold off on deciding the location of these things until they've gone out to bid and have a contractor, and then we can have a conversation with a real person.
Did we table that request? Is that a decision, or we good with that, or how do we want to
Unless there's
proceed?
some urgency, that would be my preference.
No, I mean, it's not until you're going to be, start deconstructing, and then they won't be probably bringing in large amounts of supplies until spring.
They're probably talking about parking their equipment as well.
Yeah.
I'm not really, I agree with Terry. I think the Keystone parking lot is fully utilized, and I would be very reluctant to take up a lot of space with a construction project there.
And if we're refurbishing Cross Street, who knows what they could put on it and potentially damage that.
Yeah, I would be more amenable to the Cross Street lot with the proviso that it would be returned to the same condition it's in now. And that if they needed to resurface it after the end of it, they should be on notice that we could put that demand in. Do you think that's reasonable, Terry?
The only problem is that the lot, although not fully utilized, the EV charging stations are there. And while construction was going on in Bridge Street, the contractor was asked to leave room for people to charge, but rarely did it happen.
Bob? Andrew, I think you've got the right idea in that there doesn't appear to be any urgency. to do this tonight. Why don't we do what you suggested and wait until the contractor has been chosen and have a meeting directly with that person? What can we do that'll work for both the town and the contractor?
I think that will be too late already.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. I mean, I think, you know, certainly the business community has experienced a lot of impact from construction, both of the Iron Bridge and Bridge Street, and now the Bridge of Flowers. And we should be doing everything we can to, you know, reduce the impacts that the downtown business district faces, and including our own town property. But, you know, I think if we had, you know, a contractor to talk to, we could get a more detailed sense of what exactly they are bringing in, what kind of space they need to park things or store things, and come up with a plan that works, you know. So yeah, I agree with you, Rick.
So let's table that and we'll move on from there. And we have Tom Williams for the EMD requesting Lori Wheeler be appointed as a member of the Emergency Planning Committee. I know Lori was on earlier. I don't see her on right now, and I don't see Tom. Did you folks get the letter?
I did. And I have no problem with that whatsoever.
I'm fine with that appointment.
Okay, is there a motion?
Go ahead, Rick.
I would move that we accept the recommendation and appoint Lori Wheeler to the Emergency Management Committee.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to appoint Lori Wheeler to the Emergency Management Planning Committee. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call this matter to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Rick? Andrew?
Aye.
Myself is aye. Motion carries unanimously. Item C, the 2022-23 CDBG Grant Administration Request for Proposal Award. We have received a request for Breezeway Farm to oversee the 2022-2023 CDBG grant. I don't have the paperwork in front of me, but I know there was a motion and the numbers involved in there. Terry?
Breezeway Farm was the sole proposer after we advertised for grant administration services. And I would highly recommend that the board award them the contract.
I will make a motion that we award the grant administration fee contract for $45,500 to Breezeway Farm.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Motion made and seconded to award $45,000 for the Breezeway Farm Grant Consultant award. Is there further discussion?
$45,500.
$45,500. Thank you, Andrew.
Question for Terry. I think, did we need to designate in that motion to authorize the chair or his designee to sign the contract?
It should be added, yes.
Andrew?
I accept that as a friendly amendment.
I will be able to sign, yes. All right. So is there further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call this matter to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Andrew?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Myself as I, motion carries unanimously. Item D, approval of sub-grantee agreement with HRA for Highland Village Kitchen Improvement Project. This is part of the capital projects for the CDBG grant. Terry?
Linda is asked that the board approve Franklin County Regional Housing and Redevelopment Authority to manage the Highland Village Kitchen Improvement Project.
As funded by Shelburne's FY 22-23 Community Development Block Grant, and to authorize the chair or his designee to sign the contract. So moved.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, call this matter to the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Andrew,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
myself as I, motion carries unanimously. We have a West County Arts and Cultural Moonlight Magic Street Bridge closure request, basically the Moonlight Magic the day after Thanksgiving. It's rapidly approaching and they like to continue their 40-somethingth Moonlight Magic and be able to close Bridge Street. It's a parade permit that's come before the board, and this is something we've generally approved annually.
It's a great tradition, and I support it 100% and move we approve this request.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to report the request for the closure of Bridge Street on Moonlight Magic the day after Thanksgiving. Is there further discussion?
Might I ask that the motion be contingent upon the police chief's review and approval? I haven't received that yet.
You certainly may. Is
Thank
that
you.
agreeable?
I'm happy to allow that amendment.
Okay. Andrew?
The only other discussion item, I don't know if this requires an amendment or not. I guess I need Terry's input on it, is whether or not we need to advise the Moonlight Magic Committee to speak to us if they want to make use of the pocket park, because there will be construction on that.
They have already asked to place the Christmas tree there and to use it for a period of 10 days, but because it's an active construction site, I've suggested that they seek an alternate location.
Okay. No, I know in past years, they've used the site for other things as well, like vendors and things. So I feel like we should, you know, do you feel like we should keep the whole site off limits for Moonlight Magic?
I think we have to. There's a construction trailer there. It's fenced in.
Okay.
There's going to be materials on the ground. I think it would be in the town's best interest.
I agree. Yeah, I just wanted to make note of that. Yeah.
Excellent. So any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call this matter to a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Andrew,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
myself as I, motion carries unanimously. So item F, apparently the elementary school would like to buy some silverware for $750 for recycling, to use recycling dividends as part of their attempt to reduce solid waste at the elementary school. Terry, do you have any further information?
Apparently, the elementary school might have abandoned the use of silverware during the pandemic. That's my guess. And they've been using plasticware ever since and disposing of it after each use. They applied for grant funding and the request was denied. So now the solid waste district is suggesting that Shelburne and Buckland both contribute a portion of our recycling dividend funds to facilitate the purchase. I did speak with Buckland. She will bring it before her board as well. And we thought it would be in the best interest of both towns, should the select board decide to fund it contingent upon the other town's approval as well. But that's up to you.
I think that's reasonable.
I would make that motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
I second.
And Bob?
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
I'm just kind of curious. Did the BSE actually throw out its old silverware?
I'm not sure.
Oh, I mean, that seems like that would be a kind of a solid waste fiasco if they did, but
Other than they have a special basket they're designing to catch it in case it accidentally gets thrown away. What I was reading in the packets, so. All right, so we'll call this matter to vote. Rick,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
myself as I, motion passes unanimously. We have a Item G, part-time winter help, snow removal, recommendation to hire. We received a letter of interest from Grant, Terry,
Yeah,
Right.
Richard Grant.
Richard Grant.
who is interested in doing the shoveling snow and ice removal that had been done by our previous gentleman who decided that winters were a little too much for him at this stage. I saw that he came with good recommendations and gentlemen, your thoughts?
Go ahead, Rick.
He would report to Mark.
Yes.
Yeah,
Did Mark weigh in?
Mark is
Mark-
satisfied.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't say anything with that.
Mark's been pretty busy as well as I. Yes, we have talked.
Yep. Okay, I would move that we accept this recommendation for the part-time position of Richard Grant.
A second.
Motion made and seconded to accept the part-time position for snow and ice removal. Andrew, I'll place all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Actually,
Andrew?
Bob, I just have a question for Terry
Yeah.
before we vote. Terry, did you check the references?
Yes, I did. They were included in, I don't know, did I include them in your packet? They were
I saw
favorable.
them.
Yeah.
Very
they're-
favorable.
they're
Great,
here.
good. I have no other question.
So Andrew,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
myself is aye. Motion carries unanimously. Is there any other new business to become before this board? Moving on to any other business, our next meeting is November 6th. Moving on to correspondence. We have a letter from Bob Dean notifying him about the accounting software agreement and how that's going to be changing within the Franklin County Regional Government. Doug Engel has asked for resignation from the Energy Committee. Is that something we have to accept or just have it on notice?
Two things. One, with Bob Dean's letter, 7 towns affected by this price increase met with Bob last week. He has been in contact with the software company and they're considering a 1-year extension. So that may or may not take effect in FY25, but the group is, if they're not willing to delay the price increase a year, we are looking for a significant reduction given the number of towns that will be paying significantly more than we've ever paid for this software and the licensing.
Okay,
So I'll have more at our next meeting. As far as the resignation, yes, a motion to accept would be great.
So moved.
Second.
motion made and second to accept the resignation of Doug Eagles from the Energy Committee. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Andrew,
Aye.
Aye.
Rick, myself is aye. Motion carries unanimously.
And Doug is now a member of the Streetlight Committee. Is that not right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
We have noticed that the FY24 Community One-Stop Growth Grant growth application was denied. We also have some Division of Local Service free cash certification of $428,114 in free cash coming back to us this year. So that's a wonderful number and it puts us where, do you know, Terry, where we're at in regards to free cash and
Not, no, I don't. I'd have to go back. The last special town meeting where we transferred funds from stabilization or 2 special town meetings ago, I don't have the balance yet
okay,
of our stabilization account.
that's a wonderful number. Thank you everyone for their work and being conservative and maintaining our cash flow. Any other correspondence?
No.
this point, we'd entertain public comment. Is there anyone that'd like to make a public comment? Hearing none, I thank everyone for attending this marathon meeting. And we look forward to seeing you next on November 6th. Please be safe. Halloween is next Tuesday. There's going to be a lot of trick-or-treaters running around the village and in the area. So please be safe and watch out for goons and goblins as they run and get their goodies throughout the town. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.